What's up, class? My name is Brett Bowers, and this semester I chose Evidence Not Seen for my book review. And the author of this book, her name is Darlene Diebler Rose. She married at a young age to a man named Russell Diebler, and they immediately went to the mission field a year after they got married. And so, where they chose, prayerfully, was Papua New Guinea or the Netherlands East Indies. And so when they got there, Russell and another missionary friend that they met when they got there were doing pioneer mission work. And so the women would have to stay back at the camps, really working on things like learning languages, teaching Bible studies, preparing food, all types of things. But they weren't allowed to do or be involved in the pioneer mission work just because they were women. So, as Russell and his friend journeyed through these unreached areas to look for these unreached Native people groups, um, it was a long, hard trek. It was a long, hard journey for these guys. And when they got back from their first trip, I think they were like significantly lighter in body weight because just the malnutrition and not having enough resources to really live off of. So, after a few times visiting these people after they made contact first, Darlene was able to join Russell on this mission experience. And so these people had never ever come in contact with anybody that was white before, anybody that had blonde hair, anybody that had blue eyes, and things like that. And so you can imagine not only was there a language barrier, but a culture barrier, and just a whole world view shift to minister and witness to these people. And so that was difficult in and of itself. Although the mission experience was cut short due to World War II beginning. Japan was basically going around in the Pacific and conquering whole nations at a time. And so, as they heard of this news, it was almost too late. They had to pretty much flee where they were doing mission work and go and find maybe like a retreat or like a refuge spot with these other missionaries who they had met when they first got there. And so their mission work was cut short. Now, a few weeks later, they were hearing about these shock troops going in and pretty much demolishing and conquering these areas. And so obviously they were living in fear, but they were trusting in God at the same time to redeem them from the situation and let them continue to do mission work. So eventually, the shock troops came, and fortunately, they did not kill any of these people that are mentioned in this book, but they did separate the men from the women. The men were taken to a separate labor camp, and the women to another labor camp, and they were held in these concrete walled, dirt floored barracks where they would do mentally and physically demanding, exhausting work for the Japanese army for years and years until the war ended. Although the commander there, as you can imagine, was pretty violent to these people, to these prisoners of war who were American, Dutch, British, all types of nationalities. But the significant thing to point out here is that Miss Darlene was really like a leader from day one when she arrived here in this labor camp as a prisoner of war. Her spirits were not diminished. They did not dwindle. She always kept her hope in God and her faith in the Lord to rescue these people and to rescue her from the situation. So she used that as a platform for the gospel. She even got to tell the gospel to the commander, who had fiercely beaten people with his cane, kicked people, even to the point of death at times. So the living situation and just the barracks were just, as you can imagine, not exactly the place you want to live in. Plus, they were affected by diseases and viruses such as malaria, beriberi, dysentery, malnutrition. They really only ate like rice and like porridge, no sustainable like hearty and rich food to live off of and work off of for 10 to 12 hours a day. And so they also became much lighter in weight. Their health diminished quickly. And then to add on top of that, Darlene was eventually captured from that labor camp and then taken to a separate prison where they would take these people who they were trying to convict them of these charges of espionage against the Japanese army. Like, since she was American, since these other people were Dutch and British, they would try to charge them with espionage or spying on the Japanese army and giving information that they have then to the American army, the American military, about their location and stuff like that. And so she was taken to this prison camp and isolated in like a 6x6 cell by herself for months and months at a time. They would do like really heavy and hard interrogations, trying to get her to lie, trying to get her to sign these pieces of paper that were false, but she kept the faith. And all throughout this journey, God had been performing miracle after miracle after miracle in her life. And it's just awesome to see how God worked through this situation in her life. So eventually, God rescued her from that prison camp where she was taken hostage and kept by herself in a cell, and then returned her back to the labor camp, where in a few weeks the Potsdam Declaration would be signed by Japan because America had dropped the bomb and ended the war. And so all throughout this time, God really used her, her husband, who also died while he was in his separate labor camp there due to malnutrition and dysentery, really used them to spread the gospel and to make his name known among these unreached people groups. And so upon her return home, she had been gone for 8 years now out of regular American society, modern society. And so you can imagine the technological and cultural advances that had been made when she was gone were very, very stark. It was a stark contrast from when she had left. So when she got back, she didn't know how to use a telephone. She didn't really know what a TV looked like. The music had changed, the dress, the fashion, the food even had changed dramatically. And so all of that was a part of the healing process, not only dealing with and grieving over her lost husband and all the people that she experienced die through that time. But she remarried a few years later, and then she chose faithfully to go back with that new husband to the same location where she continued serving for approximately 30 years in the same spot. And so ultimately I would like to recommend this book. It's like one of my top 3 favorite books now, and I guess that's about it. Thanks for listening.